We are going to call this meeting to order now. It is 6:38 p.m. on August 24, 2023, and this is a public meeting of the City of Portland Police Accountability Commission. Please note that this meeting will be followed by an executive session, which will start between 8 and 9 p.m., and that the whole meeting may run longer than it is 9 p.m. schedule and time. If the Spanish language interpreters, Sasha or Maria, can please give the information on the Spanish language interpretation?
Claro que sí. Esta es una reunión pública sujeta a las leyes del estado de Oregón y a las normas administrativas de la ciudad de Portland y va a ser grabada. Hay interpretación en español disponible para esta reunión. Al acceder a la interpretación en español, verá el video de los oradores, pero el audio será reemplazado por el intérprete. Para acceder, por favor, haga clic en Interpretación de lenguaje en los controles de la reunión de Zoom en la parte inferior de su pantalla y seleccione Español.
Muchas gracias, María.
De nada.
The city also offers ASL interpretation, which is being provided by Maria and Kevin. Please pin their video feed to see their interpretation throughout the meeting. The closed captioning is turned on in Zoom as another means of assistance, but please note that this is an automatic captioning service and is not always accurate. The city supports access to meetings of the Police Accountability Commission and it can provide other language support as well. Please email in advance of future public meetings, either as a response to a public meeting notice or directly to policeaccountability@portlandoregon.gov to ask for other access assistance, including interpretation into other languages. This meeting is a public meeting subject to City of Portland and Administrative Code and Oregon state law and is being recorded. For this meeting, the chat function is enabled for commission members to communicate with each other. Members of the public will be able to ask questions using Zoom Q&A feature as the commissioners are presenting and or discussing things. If attendees have questions, please feel free to submit them to the Q&A feature. We hope to use this feature to help guide our conversation during the meeting and future meetings and agenda topics. We'd like to be clear that no all questions will be answered during the meeting, but if answered, both the question and answer will be visible to you and will become part of the meeting record. To access this feature, just click on the Q&A icon on the middle of your screen. And now I will pass it to Co-Chair Dan for the land acknowledgement.
Thank you. I'm going to turn the stand off over here. Dan Handelman, I use he, him pronouns. I'm one of the three co-chairs for this final phase of the PAC's work. And I am going to read the city's land acknowledgement, which is not as strong as it would be if you were hearing it right from me. So this is what it says. We acknowledge that the rivers, lakes, streams, and lands of the lower Willamette River rest upon the occupied territories of the Multnomah, Wasco, Cowlitz, Calumet, Clackamas, Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Molalla, and many other tribes. We recognize the many villages, traditions, cultures, and relationships that existed along the river since time immemorial. We recognize these tribes stewarded these lands and rivers since time immemorial for future generations. We recognize and undertake responsibility for the destruction of the river and land, of traditional food sources, sacred places, and multifaceted ways of life. We acknowledge the economic and social values that enabled the harm to the river, including systemic racism, classism, and other systems of oppression that perpetuate harm against Black, Indigenous, and immigrant communities along the river. With this acknowledgement, we commit to honoring and learning from the past and working towards a more equitable and sustainable future for the lower Willamette River. We commit to seeking solutions that acknowledge the inequities of past socioeconomic policies and the harm done to people and our relationships to these lands and waters.
Thank you, Co-Chair Dan. Now we're going to review together the community agreements, and it's in page 5. We're going to read it, and then we're gonna ask the question. And also, Ayumide, can you get back to the second page? Okay. Now we're going to focus, and I'm gonna ask everyone, all the community agreements are very important, but if we can also remember that we need to keep focus on what our goal is, and that way we can mark our conversations and opinions on that community agreement. I think it's on the first page, but yeah, I wanna just, keep focus on the objectives of this meeting and individual agenda items. Utilize facilitators to note additional topics for discussions. Thank you. Thank you, facilitator Ayumide. And now I can ask, do we all commit to following the community agreements for today's meeting and to gently call in our colleagues and collaborators if needed? And if I can see your hands. Thank you very much. Now I will pass it to co-chair CMAP to talk about the timeline.
Yes, greetings, everybody. Again, focusing on our screen, as you see here, we've split our work into 6 phases as the Police Accountability Commission. We're now in the concluding phase of our work, which is the 6th and final phase. This phase will be focusing on taking everything that's done in the previous phases and converting it to proposed changes to the city code and the settlement agreement, and approving those for council consideration along with the final report that we'll present to city council. We work until the end of this month, August 31st, which is just coming up in just barely over a week. And we present our proposals to the city council the following month at some date in September that we're still identifying. We have a clue, but we just got to make sure that the council agrees to it completely. And then, hopefully we put this together for approval in September. Now, as far as the concluding phase with our outcome documents, we are creating the things that we create in this phase will include the code change to the code change proposal to the city council. So these proposed changes to city code is what we're putting together. Final reports of the Police Accountability Commission, which will include some explanations and rationales for the legal text, recommendations for the board's bylaws or the Bureau's policies, recommended changes to the settlement agreement, and recommendations to other levels of government, such as the city council. And in this slide, what we do is that we're going to project a plan for the concluding phase of the Police Accountability Commission's work. This slide is for members of the public to be able to understand how the commission gets from now through the end of the phase. What you see in the middle is the blue boxes. They are the public meetings. The pink boxes below are the consultations that we've had with our inside legal counsel / Police Accountability Commission's attorneys. Today's meeting falls into the blue boxes you see with the purple outline around the box in the middle of the screen. Following today, these are the upcoming meetings for the Police Accountability Commission. We concluded our community information sessions this week. We had our final one, and a few of you are a few of our participants in our audience have attended, and we're grateful for your presence here today. And the things that we'd like to highlight is that we're going to meet next Monday and Thursday from 6:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. Some meetings run long until August 31st. The next meeting is absolutely Monday, the 28th at 6:30. And is expected to include discussions on the final draft report, possible vote on the final code package. Both of these meetings are hybrid with an in-person location at the Portland building. You may notice some of our staff currently are actually in location right now. You'll see the commission room on your screen. If you guys change your view a little bit, you'll see it every now and then, but I believe Austin and our project coordinator, Samir, is actually there as well. There are two tentative meetings on Tuesday and Wednesday of next week, if needed. They may be canceled if they're not needed. Both are Zoom only and are 6:30 to 9 p.m. And going into a review of today's meeting purpose, today we will finish members reporting back, and then the commission reviewing, as well as several documents that are inputted into the ongoing process of the commission, and in the process of finalizing our recommendations. These documents include the City Council feedback, the final checklists of tasks, the community input tracker, the discussion groups reports, the equity reviews and values and goals, and staff suggestions based off of gaps or contradictions or technical edits. This will include some report backs from the members who volunteered to report back on some of these documents as well. Following that, the draft of the final report will be introduced, and the Police Accountability Commission will review the areas of agreements documents that are now appendices to the final report. And this is one of the two items that the commission has to finalize before concluding its work. And then finally, later today, we will have also general public comment, and we welcome the public's input into our work. And I'll hand it back to our facilitator.
Thank you, Co-Chair Simab. Our next item on the agenda is to hear an update from community engagement. And I'm gonna pass it to a staff to give us that report. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Yay! Oh my gosh, technology. Thanks, OpenSignal. We are down here in the Portland building, so feel free to join us next Monday if you're having some FOMO. We've got Commissioner Yume and Commissioner Ajay here as well. I would like to congratulate all of you for getting through the community engagement events. Thank you so much to the commissioners who have joined us. Thank you to the ones who have joined us on Zoom, in person, the ones who couldn't join us but wanted to join us. Really appreciate all the work that you put into making those community engagement events successful and really making sure that the community's voices were heard directly by y'all, since you guys are part of those communities. We ended up having a total of 23 community engagement events in 10 months. The first community engagement event that we did was November 3rd, and we just wrapped up our last PAC community engagement event on Tuesday evening, which was pretty awesome, pretty great event over at Awami. So we've inputted all of that stuff into the draft final code. I was working on that today and yesterday, as far as reports that I got back from LD Consulting and from Four Forces with a lot of numbers and graphs and things like that for how many people we reached just in the last 7 weeks when we onboarded those 2 consultants. So yeah, really just want to take time to say thank you for all of your help with all of that work, and really excited to see how that can inform y'all's decision-making process in the next 6-7 days. And I thought also that it might help for some clarity if I just share my screen and show you kind of the reporting tracker that I've put together. So I'm gonna do that really quick. Okay. Can you all see my screen? Hopefully. Okay. So I worked with somebody in the Planning and Sustainability Bureau who helped me do this. So basically what we have is a giant SharePoint sheet. So every single public comment, whether it was given at a meeting or given through the SurveyMonkey link as advanced public comment, or it was at a community engagement event that was spoken, is in this document. And has all of the advanced public comment all the way back to when that form started in the beginning of 2022. And then it also has all of the public comment that was spoken at meetings that I was present at, which is most meetings before April, most Mondays and Thursday evenings, and then since Jamie came on board, just Thursday nights I've been doing. So that is all in here, and you can scroll through and you can see it. And then you can see what we did, if you look at like this line, is actually went over and created themes, because a lot of the comments had like multiple themes that they were talking about. So we wanted to make sure to be able to track those themes and what like context areas were getting repeated throughout the last 2 years for feedback. So you can see, let's look at line 31. There was a listening session. This is one of our first community engagement events we did, and this person was talking about one of the officers, and so this directly went into like the officer contact or ethics scope, and it also went into hiring and training and firing. So you can see these different themes that we came up with. And then what's really cool and will be helpful when you all go to present for City Council is over here we've got this graph section. And so you can see the different themes that we put together that kept coming up. You can see how many times those themes were mentioned. Obviously the biggest one was process improvement for the board, followed closely by officer conduct and ethics. And then you can see it as a graph as well. So it was just trying to provide a way to pull these numbers and make them make sense for when you all go to report to City Council next month. So this is kind of just, again, different metrics and ways of looking at them, how many themes we had, how many total comments we had, things like that. And then just tracking the meetings in general that we had. So I hope this provided maybe some sort of clarity. Again, this is just one giant spreadsheet. So hopefully that'll help, and I'll make sure to get you guys a link to that so that you can view that. I'll try and work on that tonight. Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you. I'll turn it back over to Victoria.
Thank you, Austin. Thank you for all the work that you did in this area. That's a very important aspect of the PAC. Thank you very much. Now our next item on the agenda is the open discussion or revision inputs. Please to the slide 14. And next, members can discuss anything that came up in their document review that you like to bring to your colleagues' attention. They might help in updating the documents later today. Members volunteer at previous meetings to read and report back. In addition to reporting back, you can discuss anything that comes from these documents that might help you develop your code recommendations. Is there anybody or the co-chairs, anybody that would like to start this discussion? Anybody would like to report back? Yes, co-chair Charlie.
Let me take my hand down real quick. Okay, so co-chair Commissioner Dan Handelman and I will have to share this because I tried to print out some of the work we had done together and it's not reflected on my Word document. So I'll read this equity review from Access to Information, what the concern is, and then my co-chair Handelman will help me with what we thought about this. So the first one is compelling testimony. A3, refusal to truthfully and completely answer all questions may result, oh, this is simple, may result in discipline up to and including termination. Change may to should and or will. What did we decide?
Well, we looked at the charter, and the language in the charter says may. So we really can't change that because that's what's in the city's constitution. So
Okay.
It's a good thing, but we can't do it.
All right. A6, in addition to investigator interviews, compelled testimony of sworn officers may also be done in a hearing of the board in which the community members on the board will have direct access to the officer. So the question is, it's sort of a question, yeah, how community members will have direct access to officers? What does that really mean?
Right, and so in the section on the hearings, we addressed this because there are limitations in state law and other documents that limit how many people can talk to an officer during such an investigation. So that's addressed in the code, in the draft code.
Okay, thank you. And then under D, data, D1, if the board requests medical information of any individual in an investigation, the requested information shall be limited to the scope of the complaint. This part may take in consideration this goal and value of harm. So it's highlighted that says, not re-traumatizing people affected by police misconduct or the disposition of complaints.
And so you all may remember that we put one of the reasons that you can go into executive session, and this is covered by the state law in executive session, is to cover medical information. So the harm that may come from discussing those in a public meeting is going to be at least diminished by having the executive session if they have to discuss those records. So I think we've covered that as well.
And then the last one for access to information, D3, information given to the board. The board will become the custodian of information given directly to the oversight board by external sources. And then they ask in another note, I will suggest to be more explicit in how the board will protect people's identity and data.
So again, in the code, it says that the board members have to protect confidential information, and then the specifics, it's just that's one of those things where we have to leave up to the board to develop in their bylaws and rules. And if that's not already in the report, we recommend that it get put in the report. Thanks.
Thanks, Dan. So I had just been working on this before our pre-meeting. And so all I have are some notes written down. I didn't really get to do much research, but maybe if you can chime in as well, Co-Chair Dan, that'd be great. This one's on board membership and it's kind of long, so here goes. A lot of it though looks like it's been answered, and there's nothing major in here. So the first one, A2, alternates. The board shall have no less than 5 alternates recruited from qualified board member applicants and from former members of the oversight board. So they're asking for definition of qualified, and process should be inclusive, and it should outline clearly what inclusive, diverse goals are. And as I was looking through the document in A2 paragraph 2, it gives qualifications for alternatives in more detail. I'm just wondering if they're wanting additional detail. And then also B1 number, oh shoot, is that a 6 or a 4? It also gives some more definitions. So I'm just not sure. Let's see. Sorry, B14. Here's a couple of things, like the board shall have community members that have worked with populations directly affected by over-policing. And I think it'd be good to have a definition of over-policing, but there is a footnote that we're supposed to be able to get that. And for membership must reflect the diversity of Portland, ethics, racial, age, gender identity, ability, professional and socioeconomical backgrounds. Geographic diversity may also be considered. So I think we have the information we need for qualifications. And then B, qualifications, let's see. People who have selected criteria, people who have had experienced mental illness because they have faced unique challenges and interactions with law enforcement. I'm not sure, yes, and I'm not sure what the question is. So I say I wrote down B12 might fix this for this particular question. So B12, I mean. Applicants who are members of communities that have been impacted by over-policing practices shall have preference in selection. And then it has a footnote 5, which really doesn't answer that. But I don't know. I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on that, Dan.
Yeah, no, I think it's also people with mental illness is covered in the charter as well, and it's in the code. So I think we're good on that one.
Okay. Cheapers. D, member support and compensation. The oversight board will be a unique type of volunteer service, different from most volunteer boards. Committees and commissions, individual members shall face unique challenges, including time commitment, exposure to trauma, and risk to privacy and safety associated with their service. The board shall create systems supporting and protecting individual members. Dan, co-chair. I know we talked about this with just before this meeting, but I can't really recall what we talked about.
Yeah, I think staff is trying to find it in the thing, but I think we were also, I think some of that specifics of what we wanted to put down for support is stuff that is going to be hard to put exactly in city code, and it's other things that's going to have to be worked out in our report and the board as they develop their actual procedures.
Right. Yeah, I did put a note. Let's leave that to the board to create. Yeah, we can't do everything. Because the other question is like, what exactly does it mean to create systems supporting and protecting these members? The statement is very open, how especially BIPOC will feel they can fully participate without being exposed to more harm. And yeah, so we'll see what staff comes up with, and maybe this again is going to have to be something left to the board. B, members of the oversight board shall receive compensation for their services to promote. And what they wanted was, because this says to promote equity, and they wanted to add fairness, but the definition of equity is just and fair. So it's there. I think members also, they said, I think members should receive compensation because that is what is fair, not to do it because it promotes equity, but that's the same difference. Although some people may like the word fair better, It is because it is fair. The way it is written is confusing. But when I looked up equity, the definition says fair. So anyway, D4, other support for board members, mental health support and services shall be provided free of charge to all board members. The board shall have access to the city employee assistance program, and staff did say they are definitely looking into that, or choose other mental health service providers. And then the comment is, it would be great to be specific about what kind of services the board will have. This is very important. Well, it also says that they will be able to choose their own provider. So I think they can choose how specific that is. Trying to go into specifics about, mental health services could be a very long list. And so I think, again, they should be able to choose what kind of support they need. And it'd be kind of hard to foresee that. E, onboarding process and training. I think these trainings are important as well. So there's a list of trainings here that are being asked to add to the already long list of trainings. I'm not sure what we will do about that. Any ideas, co-chair?
Well, I think what you talked about earlier is maybe we should just add that to the report, and we should look at the transition plan too, because that's the first set of board members are going to be trained. If that's something we want to contemplate, we should put that in the transition plan, but it doesn't have to be in the code right now, and we can add it as a part of the report.
Okay, I'm trying to make a note. Okay, term lengths and renewability. Leave of absence time shall be granted if needed for good cause, including for issues related to physical or mental health. So they're asking, should they define for good cause? Again, I put a note, that's something we might leave to the board. And that is that? Oh, that's the end. So any questions or suggestions?
Thank you, Co-Chair Charlie. If there are any questions or comments, what Co-Chair Charlie just reported? Okay, I don't think it's any comments or questions. Thank you very much, Co-Chair Charlie, for explaining all that. Our next item in the, go ahead, Co-Chair Dan.
Well, just so you know, we also, and maybe this will come up somewhere else, but I'm not sure where, that the code that we quasi-finalized on Monday, we had split that up into different subsections, and Co-Chair Michelle Wesley and I had not yet gotten to the second half of the investigations part, and we found probably about 30 things, that most of which were technical fixes that are, just word changes or, slightly, things that we'd already agreed on, like advocate versus complaint navigator, and just a couple of things that could be more significant than that. So we're going to run like legal counsel before presenting them to you all. And Commissioner or Co-Chair Husseini is working on the last and final section about board membership for review. And if you didn't see the email earlier, that the basically staff asked us to get our changes to code in by tomorrow morning, which is Friday at 8 a.m., which doesn't leave us a lot of time after this meeting, but that's the the proposed final deadline to get that stuff, so it gets time to be reviewed by attorneys before we vote on the final package. Thanks.
Thank you, Co-Chair Dan. Any comments or questions? Okay. Our next item in the agenda is that before we move to discuss any documents, inputs, and more, we will review our values and goals. And I will pass it to staff to review our values and goals now. Thank you.
Thank you. So before going into any conversation around a document, the PAC reviews its own values and goals. This document was approved by the PAC on March 24th, 2022, and is a list of the values that underpin the goals for each of the 6 values, which are listed here. There are 1 or 2 corresponding goals, and then several considerations or success criteria, which are effectively self-imposed standards and metrics by which the PAC will evaluate its own work before finalizing it and sending it off to the City Council. So as you can see, there are 6. We'll scroll through this slowly, and just as a note, there's a couple pages here, 3 pages, and numbers 3 and 5 are broken up by a page break, so just kind of bear with us for a moment, and then at the end we'll pass it over to members or co-chairs if there's any of these that you would like to highlight before we get into your discussion of the draft documents. Thank you. And this is the end of the document. So if anyone would like anything to be scrolled up or down, please feel free to ask. And then I'll pass it back to co-chairs and the members if there's any that you'd like to highlight today.
Thank you, staff. I will pass it to co-chair Charlie.
If there's anyone who wants to go ahead of me, that's fine. Otherwise, okay, I will see if I can get through this. You know, it's really, when I'm up against the system, when I have to go into council, or when I'm working on this, or I'm in community engagements, you know, or just living life in a system that doesn't value me as a human being because of who I am, what I look like, where I live, what I drive, whatever. It's very painful and emotionally draining. And so reading our introduction was really, really hard. But I'd like to go over continual effectiveness, because I think continual effectiveness was have the flexibility to meet the changing needs of community that they serve, right? a system that investigates every instance where a person is killed or harmed by police swiftly, openly, and fully, to the board has ways to measure its effectiveness, including based on rates of sustained complaints, satisfaction surveys, and other factors. A system that regularly reviews itself and is able to respond and adapt if these measurements show areas in need. And I don't know about y'all, but I feel like continual effectiveness is something I want to keep an eye on after August 31st, right? I don't feel like my job ends on that day, because continual effectiveness has got to have eyes on it to make sure it's doing what we want. And so, yeah, that's how I interpret continual effectiveness.
Thank you, Co-Chair Charlie. Is there any other comment about values and goals? Okay, if you think that this is complete, we can move to the next item on the agenda. That is the draft final report. And we're gonna start with the discussion. We will now move to discussing the final report draft and the previously approved areas of agreement for a final review. And I will pass it to the co-chairs. Then I will ask to follow our normal discussion rules. Co-chair Dan or co-chair Charlie or co-chair Sima.
The reason there's a pause here is that we haven't really seen the substance of the report itself yet, but the part that we're going to look at are the areas of agreement. And you may remember we opened them all back up a couple of weeks ago as we're heading toward the end and made some changes to them, and then we didn't say, oh, now we need to finalize these, because we recognize as we're developing the code there may be other things to tweak. So staff has gone through and found some of the places that we already identified and some of the places that have since come up that we probably need to tweak, and I think that's what we're going over tonight is the areas of agreement. And then because we're going to be adopting the full report as one big blob, multi-hundred-page blob, I don't know that we need to adopt all of them. At least we don't. Staff indicated we don't have to adopt them one at a time, go through 7 documents, but instead we can just adopt them together, either tonight or when we do the code. I hope that helps. I hope I'm right.
Thank you, Co-Chair Dan. Staff, would you like to?
Yeah, that's all correct, and we'll just kind of quickly do a walkthrough, click through of the document real quick, and then get to the back end. So, what Co-Chair Dan was saying is accurate, that it's going to be very, very long. However, part of the reason that it's very, very long is that it duplicates some things that you've already seen before and that's already been approved. So for example, I'm just going to skip down past this for a moment. There's a ton of appendices in here, and the code itself in the version, it's going to be annotated code, not redlined, will be double the length of the version that you eventually approve, which is currently about 95 pages in the large font size, just because there's going to be, and it'll be double the length so that you can compare to the old code and the new code. So that's how it'll end up getting so long. And then starting here at the, the values and goals, the agenda and scope, these are all documents that have either been approved before or like Charter 210, which is just a page, are not really subject to the PAC's decision-making, but are there as a reference. All the areas of agreement, all of this has been approved before, and so that's where all the length will come from. And we're going to scroll down in just a moment to all these parts, because the areas of agreement are exactly as Co-Chair Dan mentioned, the focus of the discussion today. But just to quickly sort of indicate what the upper portions will be, there'll be a section on the parameters within which the PAC worked. So that starts with the city charter and the settlement agreement and all the other legal parameters. Then the values and goals, which are self-imposed parameters, the agenda and scope, which is how the work was broken up, and certainly the input and guidance given to the PAC by the community. There'll be some a section about how that was obtained through the different processes that were reported on earlier today in the community engagement update. the community engagement framework that the PAC used to guide that work, and then somewhere in there will be the bylaws as well as the research that was done by the PAC, which includes all 3 of the fact-finding phase documents. And then it'll pivot to talking about the decisions that were made by the PAC to develop these 7 parts of the new system: the access to information, officer accountability, structural oversight, and this will be narrative form. All the way through broader system. There'll also be the section on the transition plan, and then a brief conclusion. So that's the main bulk of it, and that'll be the focus of next week's discussions. There's some reference materials in here and research that you've received at various times, and then all the different documents. And then just before we move on, the last thing to mention is at the back here is where all those recommendations that go into bylaws and code, all of that will be at the back of the document here. So because it kind of flows that way from inputs into what the PAC is recommending. And the legislative agenda component relates to the federal and state law as well. So that's just kind of the sections that you'll see here. But for today, it'll be starting with the areas of agreement on access to information and officer accountability, and then skipping the flow chart because that's being updated. And then going into the structural oversight, board membership oversight, staff reporting and transparency, and finally, broader system. So with that, scroll all the way down here, just a moment while I find that spot, and I'll pass it back over to facilitators.
Thank you, staff. We're gonna start with the discussion. We ask you to follow our normal discussion rules. Please, it's slide 17, I'm sorry. Please be brief each time you speak, even though you can speak multiple times. Please be facilitator, and remember that we use a weighted stack in our discussions. And finally, please be forward-looking in your comments. Co-chairs, would you like to start the conversation?
Well, I think we need to have staff identify this because we didn't really have time to walk through this document. So I'll leave it to them to bring us to this section, and we can help lead the discussion.
Okay, thank you very much, co-chairs. Dan, staff?
Yes, thank you. So before getting into, there was a list of things that were identified. I wanted to give some space if Co-Chair Charlie wanted to, based on the equity comments from earlier, make any adjustments to access to information. Because at present, there are no proposed changes or flagged items in access to information.
Not at this moment, just, this last minute question. I would have to, have some advance notice. Co-Chair Dan, how about you?
Yeah, so I think what I'll do, I'll work with Co-Chair Michelle Wesley, and we'll see. It seems more reasonable for us to try to add language based on the equity review into the report itself instead of changing the areas of agreement at this point. So we'll put something into that section of the areas of agreement. I mean, that's the introduction and the substance of the report. I'm a little tired again. Thanks.
Thank you for clarifying that. So then with that, we'll go on to the next item, which is the areas of agreement on officer accountability. And here there are several things, so we'll just go through those as they come up from top to bottom. So the first thing is, it's in multiple places, but it's fairly general as well. So the use of case versus complaint, this is effectively a technical fix. Just wanted to flag that as it was fixed in the draft code, the clarification around when to use case versus complaint would be made in this document too. So just for those who are following along, the difference effectively is that a case is something that it's the broader category. Some cases are complaints, which are initiated by a person coming in and filing a complaint with the Office of Community-Based Police Accountability. But there are also cases that are not complaints. And so the broader term case captures both of those as well. And those types of cases include the mandatory investigations of things like uses of deadly force. And so that's just a clarification in here. The second thing, I'm just going to need to find it just a moment, please. Just a second. Looks like we've got the wrong version here.
Staff, is it all right if I put out another reminder to the commissioners while you're looking for that?
Please.
So I put in the chat to commissioners that if you want to privately chat or email me and the other co-chairs and staff about which of the two meetings next week, if 2 days next week, if you're available for Tuesday or Wednesday night, in case we need an extra meeting to get through this huge document before we vote on it Thursday, then please, just please either private chat it to us or put it in email so we can figure out which day is most available to the most commissioners. Thanks.
Thank you, Co-Chair Dan. Co-Chair Charlie.
Yeah, so I have a question. Is it at all possible, is there any possibility we'll end up having the 29th and 30th?
My understanding is that's not the intent, and I don't know if it's going to be logistically possible because it's the end of August and we've got 20 people whose schedules have to align. So we're trying to make sure that we only use one of those 2 days instead of both of them. That would be the worst. I believe that the staff described that as the worst case scenario if we had to use both days. But again, if we know what your schedule is, then we know which day we can actually lock in. Thanks.
Okay.
Got it.
Staff, I got something
Yep.
else I can bring up while you're looking if you want.
Go for it. I think I found it, but please.
Okay. Well, in the updates section, I forgot to say that we had asked for people to start sending in stuff for what may be their minority report. Or they may actually end up in their report because they may not just be a minority of folks who think these things. I did hear back from Commissioner Brown. I appreciate that, and sent those on to staff along with a couple of ideas of my own. If we have time before we have to go into executive session, we can run through the ideas that have already been floated to prime the pump and maybe get your creative juices flowing in case there's stuff that you want to add to that. I know Co-Chair Michelle Wesley is working on her input as well.
Thank you, Co-Chair Dan. Co-Chair Charlie, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Also, if I may say, I thought we might use Faith's, what was that list that she created? We might take a gander at in our minority or majority document. Is Faith
Are
on
you talking
here?
about the response to the city's memo?
I think so.
Okay. Yeah, that's probably going to end up in the report in various places, yes.
Thank you, and I believe staff is ready to start with the discussion of the document.
Yes, I believe so. And I might ask a colleague to help to jump in here and explain some of these as well. But there's a proposed change under A5A little 2, which is to change should to shall in both cases with relation to staff disclosing bias and or conflict regarding a complaint or complainant or nature of the allegations. And this was previously flagged but not concluded. Discussion was not concluded on it. So if this looks familiar, it's because it was discussed, just not finished.
So staff, I have a quick question.
Yes.
Was this something that we, when we changed the wording, when we put it in the code, did we already establish that we wanted to use the word shall in code?
Yeah, let me just find that for you here. So it's here, this is the code. As a side note for those following along at home, if you see the draft watermark here and diagonally, that's always going to be the code with the line numbers. So yeah, it is updated in the code. So at this point, one could consider that effectively a technical edit because you've already decided on it in the code. Is that the point that I think I might be a step behind on this one, but is that the point you were trying to make?
Unless an objection by the other commissioners, it does seem to me that it's something we already decided in code and we're just aligning the areas of agreement with the code. I think we should just let you make it as a technical edit. Does anybody object to that? Some thumbs up and wagging fingers. Okay, thank you.
I'm seeing one commissioner shake their head, so if they'd like to raise their hand. I'm not sure if that was a no problem shake of the head or an opposition, but yeah.
And, okay, is that commissioner going to share? Or is that was agreeing? I think it was Commissioner Debbie. Commissioner Debbie, would you like to say something?
I thought the question was, is there any objection? And so my response was, no, there isn't. Sorry, I confused.
No, that's fine.
Another one.
Yeah, and I don't need to ask the questions stuff then, because it's just
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So I'll just flag these as we go. Which ones have already been changed in the document there? So advocate to complaint navigator is the example that co-chair Dan gave of a technical edit. It's kind of a textbook one at this point. The terms were used interchangeably. They do effectively, they were used the same way, but the commission has agreed to consistentize is not a word, but to make consistent the use of the term complaint navigator. So that's the upper edit here. And then similarly, this is the header of 35D.060, and it was already updated to types of conduct / cases the board will address in the draft code. So actually, it says types of conduct / complaints within board jurisdiction. So this one was flagged earlier, and perhaps if members would prefer to have that a line here that is a third option beyond what was in the original areas of agreement and what ended up being put into code. Co-chairs, is that something you'd like to do in a situation like this?
Well, yeah, certainly when there's a conflict between the code and what's being proposed here in the areas of agreement, my suggestion, commissioners, is that we leave the areas agreement with the word board will address, because that's one of the things that is contemplated in the charter, that that we give them other areas to address, and then the kind of legal terminology is better in the code. But I think having that that this is what we want them to address makes more sense in the areas of agreement. So I don't have a problem leaving it with will address.
Okay, so then in this case, this particular text would require a decision of the commission. Facilitator Victoria, would you like to ask the questions on the second one, just to clarify?
The second one. Okay, I'm ready to ask a question. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Thank you. Can we move on to the next? Thank you.
Okay, so the next item on the list, and thanks for bearing with us as we figured this out, is under C3, which is the hearings process. I'm just going to scroll here. Okay, so for this one, it's the proposed change. This text is the original draft of what was in the code. That text in the code did get updated. So just going to clarify that here, and perhaps co-chairs, if you'd like to pull the text from the code, can do that as well. And see the top paragraph here that replaces the subsections that are highlighted below.
Staff, why don't you switch over to that area of the code where the other language is, and we'll see. And maybe paste that in as a track change under the other track change so we can compare them. There we go. Ah. I think this is going to take the co-chair Michelle Wesley reading this to make it easier to follow what's what. So maybe we should start with the original and then read the change.
I'm happy to do so. The bottom one is first, right?
Well, why don't we do the original first and then read the change, the bottom one?
Okay. So the board shall consider the public interest, the officer's preference, the precedent set by the existing oversight system, and other relevant factors to decide whether to hold part or all of preliminary full investigatory disciplinary or appeals hearings in public or in executive sessions. However, above all, the board will apply applicable federal and state law in its determination of whether part or all of the hearing will be held in public or in executive session. Okay, there's that. Proposed change. The board will decide whether some or all of the preliminary hearing will be held in open session or executive session in accordance with the existing legal standards, and considering the public interest, the officer's preference, see ORG 192.660 2B, the complainant's preference, precedent set by the existing oversight system, and other relevant factors.
Okay. Since this was approved in the code, do I still need to ask the question?
I think in this particular case, Facilitator Lara, because they're very similar, but we haven't contemplated putting this in. I just see if anybody has discussion about it, and if not, then let's just approve it.
Okay, thank you. Let me ask first if there are any questions or comments. No? Okay, I can ask the question. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the new proposed change? Is there general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? I can see everyone. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Can we move on? Yes.
Okay, so the next item is this. So just to clarify, this was all a replacement for this version down below. So that's why all of this was flagged as approved. So I'll move down to, and just for transparency, advocate changing to complaint navigator is that proposed change. The public hearing aspect was already addressed in a previous meeting. Switching to the due process and just cause rules, which are here. So this entire section was flagged for further discussion. And my understanding is that co-chairs may recall more details as to why, but my recollection is that this had to do with the text that was discussed at the last meeting on Monday around how it pertains to represented versus non-represented employees. But if there are other reasons that may be worth discussing here today, that might be worthwhile, and if not, I believe co-chairs would want to table that otherwise for a meeting.
Okay, well, I thought our goal was to try to finalize the areas of agreement today, but I understand what you're getting at, that this is something that we're still sort of in the middle of discussing for the code. I'm going to see if I can find this. So it's flagged for further discussion, and we listed what the due process rights are. I think, fellow commissioners, my suggestion would be to say that in just an introduction there in A, so the discipline process will be consistent with due process and just cause considerations as they apply to the specific employees in question. And that way we don't have to get into the nitty-gritty about whether it's a represented or non-represented officer and other legal questions that we weren't aware of when we were actually writing this areas of agreement. So I don't know if I can find what I just said. I have the transcript here. Maybe I can put it in the chat. Consistent with due process and just cause consideration as they apply to the specific employees in question. Yeah, that's what I'm suggesting that we add there. I'm going to put that in the chat. So staff, it's at the bottom of A, the intro A. Yeah, the discipline process shall be consistent with due process and just cause considerations, and then the language I just suggested, as they apply to the specific employees in question. And then that way we don't have to go through and make huge changes, especially if we end up changing the code again. So. I'm going to give it to the facilitator.
Okay, thank you. Is there any questions, comments, or edits in this area? No? Okay, I'm gonna ask the question. Is there a strong opposition to change? Oh, yes, Commissioner Sophia, go ahead.
I just wanted to make sure I'm clear on what we're doing. So right now we're just approving the proposed, or we're the proposed language there. Okay. And we're gonna still discuss this because it's been flagged. Is that correct?
We can discuss it before approving it.
No, I meant we were gonna discuss it later. I thought there was more discussion on this. Actually, yeah, I thought there would be more discussion on this because it was sort of flagged prior because of some other issues. So that's why I was asking. I just wanted to make sure that this is just a proposal and that we're still going to have some discussion on this at a later on.
Commissioner Sophia, I will pass it to Co-Chair Dan to answer that question.
Well, Commissioner Glenn, if you have anything else specific that you want to add to this section to help align it with what we've got right now in the code, I'm happy to have more discussion. But my intent here is to just kind of put a broad, the clause I'm putting in is, I think, broad enough to cover everything we change in code, and we may be having more discussions about the code, and I don't want to have to go back and revisit this again. So if we leave it in with this kind of broad statement that has to apply to appropriately to the officer in question, then we can kind of finish up the areas of agreement and then have more discussion about the code stuff, which is, I think this is why, as staff indicated, why this was flagged for discussion in the first place. Had to do with whether these due process rights apply to every officer or not.
Okay, but we will come back to the whole document again. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Co-Chair Dan, and thank you, Commissioner Sophia. Then I will move to ask the question just for this area. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Thank you. Can we go, can we move on? Okay.
So staff, I think maybe just scroll down to the next page and keep as much of it on the screen as possible, just so I can sort of explain my thinking here. So the next thing is just talking about how the state defines due process, then how more broadly we define due process based on some case law that we found, and then the second B says due process is the officer's right to a separate due process hearing. We might need to add a similar clause in there that says due process include the officer's right to a separate due process hearing as applied to the officer in question or the employee in question or something like that. Yeah, as it applies. Yeah. And then just talks about what happens with those due process hearings. And I'm going to check my copy. Yeah, that's the end of it there, B1 and 2. So I'm just suggesting putting the same clause here in B to cover our bases. That's what I meant, cover our bases.
Co-Chair Dan, did you finish?
No, why don't you go ahead and ask the questions?
Okay. Is there any questions, comments, or concerns about the change? Where is highlighted here? Okay. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Thank you. Can we move on?
Great. So there are two more items in this area of agreement, and one of them may be a relatively quick item. The appeals section was flagged for further discussion, and if anyone else has a different recollection, please jump in. But our recollection, staff side, was that this was related to the potential of adding a grounds for appeal requirement. This was already addressed in the code section on appeals, which is one of the last few in that 35D 240, and the specific things that were added in here in the code side had to do with the particular reference to applicable law and reasons to reopen an investigation as well. And that was sort of the result of that conversation. So as that has been discussed, it does appear that there may not be a need to adjust the areas of agreement, but there were certainly an opportunity at this point for anyone to, any member of the commission to propose a change. There just are no proposed changes on this section as of right now.
Okay, is there any comments or discussion? No? Okay, can we move on? Thank you.
Okay. So then the last one here had to do with F1, which was on mediation. So to be specific, this was the additions that were proposed that related to having no cost to utilize it and a neutral environment and location. This was discussed, but it was not added to the areas of agreement at the time. However, it did end up getting in code fairly significantly similarly to the proposals in this document in the areas of agreement.
Okay, well, thank you, staff. So, again, commissioners, my thought is that if we, in this case, the substantive paragraph that's proposed here in the areas of agreement is very close to what we ended up approving for the code. And my suggestion would just be to make this a technical edit and put in what we already agreed on, unless anybody wants to have a longer discussion on it.
Okay, thank you, Co-Chair Dan. Is there any questions, comments, or edits? Okay. I'm gonna ask the question. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Thank you.
And just to clarify, we'll fix, there's some awkwardness here where the letters TI become a question mark every time we copy and paste that over from the PDF, but we'll get that fixed after the fact, just to, if anyone's curious. And that's it for this document. This is the bulk of the proposed changes that were left to come back to were in officer accountability. So I will, unless there's anything else, move on to the next document, the next area of agreement.
Is there any comments, questions? Can we move on? Okay, we can move on.
Okay, so the next document is structural oversight. And there are no proposed changes or flagged items in this document at present. I could do a quick scroll through if that's helpful for members or for co-chairs at your preference. to allow for anyone to propose anything, but there hasn't been anything brought up on this one. Okay, we'll move into board membership, and there's only one thing here, and it has to do with onboarding. So this one was flagged during the transition plan discussion. So this was flagged at the full commission discussion in July 10th or 13th, that area, when the commission was deciding on whether or not to approve, which they eventually did, the transition plan, to ensure that the transition plan training requirements were reflected in this document, and that the general training requirements and the initial training for the first group of 33 members were in alignment. And so co-chairs flagged this to revisit.
Is there any comments, questions, or co-chairs, would you like to have any discussion?
And
Okay.
if it'd be helpful, I can pull up what that document says.
Oh, I
Okay.
trust you. I mean, I feel like this is another thing where we're just aligning our, in this case, we're aligning our areas of agreement with the transition plan instead of the code. So, but I feel like you feel like we should approve this. If it's the exact language from the other document, then I don't really have any problem, but I'll leave it to the other commissioners if they want to discuss it.
So just to clarify, the scrolling down here slightly, I guess it's pink, highlighted text is the differences. So the differences were added in here. For example, training on confidentiality was not in the original version of this areas of agreement, but it was in the transition plan, and so now it's been proposed in.
So we're forgetting to read it into the record is what you're saying.
Yes, thanks.
Co-Chair Michelle Wesley, would you like to read number 1 and number 1C into the record?
I'd absolutely love to. 1, training organized by staff may be delivered by staff and or by experts and affected parties, and may be combined as appropriate. Topics shall include at minimum, and then we'll just jump down to C, training on confidentiality.
Thank you, Co-Chair Charlie. Is there any questions, comments, or edits? Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Thank you. Can we move on? As staff put it on
Yes.
the chat, we can probably after that, we will do the next 2 and then definitely take a break after the other next 2. Thank you.
Yes, so that concludes all of the things that are in this document, which again is the areas of agreement on board membership. So moving into oversight staff, and there's a couple things with relation to references and citations, which are still being worked on as part of getting this report ready to be reviewed. But getting into the flagging for the things that were flagged for further discussion, and this was flagged on July 31st. It's the Bureau Director qualifications. I have no notes as to why this one was flagged, so apologies for that. But this one might be does anyone have anything still? Or if not, it can be moved on from. I can pull up what's in the code if that's helpful as well on this subject.
Is there any discussion, question about this particular item?
Staff, I'm wondering, did we align this at when we recognized that the at-will employee didn't have, there was something that we had in the language that didn't line up with there being an at-will employee? Is that what it was?
You know, I thought that's what it was too, but I'm not seeing it because this one says serve at the will and pleasure of the board, and then in the code it also says shall be appointed by and serve at the will and pleasure of the board. It seems to be, I think there's a comma that's different, but other than that, identical.
And staff, I will pass it to Commissioner Sophia.
I was just going to say that I think it was flagged because we had for cause before, but now we don't. I think that's what happened.
Thank you, Commissioner Sophia. Then, is there any additional discussion on this piece?
Staff, did we approve I'm looking here in the red line that I have of B5A sub 8, adding cultural competency from the equity analysis. We added anti-racism, anti-bias, and other trainings. B5A 8. Wow, it's pretty far down there. So it's not even the flagged section.
That's correct. It's,
B5.
yeah, a different one, but yes, it was added.
Okay, so and that's affirmed, even though it's in highlight.
Yeah, I think this one was some of these were discussed, and then consensus was achieved on them, and others were flagged for further discussion. So this one was, I think, one of the ones that was that the commission achieved consensus on.
Okay. Co-chairs, any additional discussion or any of the commissioners? No, then I'm gonna ask the questions. Can we move on? Thank you.
All right, so that's the only item under the oversight staff document, which leads into the sixth document, sixth area of agreement, which is reporting and transparency. As you can see on the right here, many of them were flagged as approved, and that's because there are no things that were not approved. There is nothing left for discussion on this document. So I'll do a quick scroll through, and then we can move on to the seventh and final document, which has one item in it. And actually, as I'm realizing, there's another document in between, but there's no proposed changes. This is just the the definitions document with all the different definitions there as well. And actually, I'm realizing that we put in the wrong one. We need to put in the one with accountability and independent judgment. But moving into the last item here, which is the broader system document, there is one item here. Just gonna find it. You know, as I'm scrolling through this, I actually think the flag was up at the very top, under, which was more of a note for transparency than an actual proposed change. I believe that this is just noting that the addition of or appointed would need to just be, for the sake of transparency, noting that when the PAC updated this text and structural oversight, you also updated it here. So nothing to do. So unless anyone has anything for this particular document, there isn't anything for this particular document.
Okay. Is there any discussion, questions, or edits for this particular document? No? Okay, I'm gonna ask the question, can we move on and then take a break? Can we move on? Okay.
So just one quick clarification. This does not, the PAC has not previously discussed the transition plan.
Okay.
So that doesn't need to happen right now. But just wanted to flag that the PAC, I shouldn't say has not previously discussed it. The PAC approved it in mid-July and has not reopened it in any way. So, and that's largely because of it's sort of separate from, it's not contributing to code in the same way that the areas of agreement were. So just as a clarification, if any members have any proposed changes to that, those are still open. But other than that, the areas of agreement are done in a final sense at this point, unless someone changes their mind in the next, several hours, I guess. So just wanted to say congratulations on that and then pass it back to Facilitator Victoria.
Thank you, staff. Okay, there is 8:10. Let's take, I don't know, we need to come back for public and comment and other stuff. Let's come back at 8:18, 8 minutes of break, probably 7.5, to continue with the public meeting, please.
Recording stopped.
Thank you. See you at 8:18. Thank you. And our agenda is general public comment. We will now take open public comment on the issues the PAC is discussing. Our community members can also tell their story about policing and police accountability. We ask members of the public to keep their comments or questions to 3 minutes in length and raise their hand in Zoom if you like to speak. Commissioner Jumi, let me just wait a couple more seconds to see if members of the public would like to speak before the commissioners. Okay. Yes, Commissioner Jumi, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge that we had a member of the community who had to leave early, but hopefully will submit written public comment to us. They just wanted to highlight the need for community members to be, or what they believed was the need for community members to be involved in the selection process of people for the new board, and making sure that there's community engagement around that. So just wanted to honor their comments and put that into the record. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, then we will go on the next item in the agenda. Is next steps and is member curiosities. Member curiosities is a brief period of time on today's agenda where members of the commission can bring items to discuss. There may be questions or follow-ups or anything you wanna share. We're not going to vote on anything during this time. We want to give a space to multiple members to share. So please take 1 minute per person at most during the time. We will get 2 suggestions in a moment, but we will start by asking if any members have questions about the PAC and its process that they like to have answered. If any members would like to answer, I mean to make any comment. Yes, Commissioner Ajay.
So I saw a bunch of people yesterday at the report around, I'm going to forget exactly what it was, but yes, what is it? The independent monitor basically provided a report about, just some of the faux pas, I guess you could say, committed by the PPP in their handling of the 2020 uprising. And I think it was really interesting, some of the things they said. I think they could have gone further, but, they had a scope. I guess they had to stay within. So definitely recommend everybody read that. And I think, is that link that was in there, is that a link? I don't think that's a link to it. But if somebody could add a link to it, I could probably find the link to it, to either read the report or to watch a recording from yesterday's thing. It was very illuminating.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments for the commissioners? Okay, well, now open it up for suggestions, follow-ups, articles you have read or that you like to share or more. Does anyone have a member curiosity? Okay. Then
While we're in next steps, there's two other items just quickly before moving into the next part. One is, I think that just wanted to note for everyone that the citations and the formatting and all of that are things that staff is still going to be fixing. So you may notice there were a couple places where the font changes or something like that in the report, just because the application of styles as 20 different documents are being combined. Those are things that we're going to fix, so you don't necessarily need to worry about proposing a change there. That's just going to be, hopefully by the next meeting, a lot of that will be cleaned up. And then also the citations. So I just wanted to flag that. And then I think the second thing, I'll pass it to co-chairs to talk about next steps between now and the next couple meetings.
Thank you. Co-chairs?
Yeah, thanks, staff. So we've got this report. We've got a first draft of it, and maybe staff, you can give us an idea when a more thorough draft will be ready before we get people breaking it down. But I'm going to put it in the chat. I'm going to put the question to everybody in the chat. But if you want to write back privately to say which part you'll want to take up on, this is going to be at least 100 pages of new material that's not stuff we already voted on. Even though it's describing stuff we already voted on. It would be good if we're going to be voting on this report to go to council that the commission have a chance to go through it. So we're going to try to break it up the same way we broke up the code into different sections. And this is the suggestion right now, that there's an executive summary. Oh, I copied and pasted, I pasted something that was old. So I'm going to try a second time and see if I can do this. Sorry again. Second try. Okay, so there we go. Executive summary, introduction and legal parameters, community input and engagement, research, powers and duties, structure and details, transition plan and broader system, and conclusion. And then there's also a whole section G of the appendix, which is kind of the notes to ourselves or notes to the city and notes to the board about what we want to see happen in the future. So people can take on more than one, but we're going to try to get this figured out by Monday's meeting at the latest. And if you can get comments back by Monday afternoon at 1 o'clock, that'd be really helpful so that we can try to incorporate it in the draft that we look at that night. So if people want to volunteer for this, you can put it to everyone in the chat. You can just put it to either me, staff, or another co-chair in the staff, or you can email it. But we do need to do some reviewing of this over the weekend. And several people volunteered already, I know, but this is the first time we've had a draft. So, and I see Commissioner Delgado's already gotten stuff started here in the chat. So the second thing is what I mentioned earlier in the meeting about the minority report, and which we don't even know. Maybe we all agree on a lot of these things, but I had stated at the last meeting where I brought this up that I think that the minority report should include the places where we voted, where therefore some people thought that something should go in and some people didn't. Just kind of show that process that happened. An example that I used in my email to staff today was just one that I remember because the most recent one where we talked about whether or not the board should hire staff people who were perhaps whistleblower officers. I realized I copied and pasted from the transcript and it says blurred instead of whistleblower. Anyway, so that's one thing that we voted on. And so right now it says no police should be hired to build community trust. And then I suggested something specific about that we can't talk about the legal advice that we're given, and we can't say whether what we're saying is based on legal advice, and that's very frustrating. I know other people share that concern, and things like that. But broadly speaking, I feel like nobody has to identify themselves, I don't think, in the minority report. I think if you want to, that'd be helpful. But I think if you just want to say, here's a concern that I had that is not expressed in our code or in the thing, we just want to have a space for people to raise those concerns. And if you want your name attached to it, that's great. And like I said, if we find that like 11 commissioners wrote the same thing, we're going to put it in the regular report. Because even though that's a majority, but it just sort of feels like that'll be more of a consensus than not. But we have to go through the minority report and approve it before it goes anywhere. So we're going to try to keep it really short because we got a bunch of other stuff to do. But that's the concept of the minority report at this point.
Thank you,
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I should say also if you can get any kind of elements that you want in that minority report in by 1 o'clock Monday. I said 1 o'clock today. Didn't get very many submissions, so 1 o'clock Monday, and we can compile it for review at the meeting, I hope.
Thank you. Is there any questions or comments about what Co-Chair Dan explained or what staff explain. I'm gonna pass it to staff.
Thank you. As we near the end of the PAC's run, I did want to recognize that while we're not 100% certain about all the meeting calendar next week and therefore don't know, this is the last guaranteed meeting that we're going to have with Ayamide as one of our facilitators. And I wanted to just take the opportunity to publicly recognize her for all of her work going back to the very first meeting of the Subcommittee on Bylaws and Internal Processes back last January. All the way through now, as well as her work providing support for the equity trainings and behind the scenes as well. We've had a lot of really great help, and I just wanted to make sure that we're recognizing the support from Ayamide here, and hope to see you at future meetings, of course, but this is definitely the last time we know we'll have you, so thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been awesome.
Thank you, Facilitator Ayomide. It's been a pleasure and honor to work with you. Thank you.
I ran into Ayamide in person one time, and she's teeny. She's so tiny. You can't tell on the camera, but you're so tiny.
Huge personality. Big dreams. Small good things come in small packages. What can I say?
Thank you. Is there any other item on member capacities? Okay. As a reminder, you can submit advanced public comment to the Police Accountability Commission via web form, voicemail, or postal mail. Thank you to all the members who attended today's meeting and for your contributions. Thank you also to the interpreters. And finally, thank you to the members of the community for attending and contributing with your questions. If you are not already signed for emails updates, please also sign up to receive updates from the PAC. The next meeting of the Police Accountability Commission will be Monday, August 28, from 6:30 to 9 p.m. Please note that this meeting will be hybrid with an in-person location at the Portland Building, room 108. It is now 8:31 p.m.
Facilitator Laura, before you close the meeting, don't we have to announce that we're heading into an executive session?
That's exactly what I was gonna say.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Okay, it is now 8:31 and the public portion of this meeting is adjourned. The PAC will move into executive session in a few minutes. We can say in like 3 minutes, we can move to the executive session. It is 8:32 now. Let's try to connect an executive session at 8:36. That way we can continue with the portion of the meeting. Thank you.
Recording stopped.